Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hello, this is Ray Gerard. Welcome to another edition of St. Paul's Letters to America. Today we have with us a special guest on our program. It's Kristin Hawkins. She is the leader of Students for Life of America, and so I want to welcome her to our program. Kristin, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me today.
So this is a program which is entitled St. Paul's Letters to America, and on this program we imagine, what if St. Paul were alive today? What if, looking at what is happening in our country, he could write a letter to America? What would he tell us? Well, on this program, we give you precisely such a letter, and we then use that letter and the thoughts of St. Paul for an in-depth discussion of what is current in our society today. And as we do this, we always bear a motto in mind, which is love and kindness through the light of truth. And so hopefully that is what we do here today. And for our proposed letter to America, we take it from what he wrote in his first letter to the Thessalonians. As we know, he wrote letters to Titus, to Timothy, to Philemon, so why not write a letter to Students for Life as an organization? And if he did, perhaps he would say something very much similar to what he wrote to the Thessalonians, which would be, "For you yourselves know, brothers and sisters, that your reception among others was not without effect. Rather, you had suffered and had been insolently treated, but you drew courage through our God to speak to others the gospel of God with much struggle. Your exhortation was not from delusion or impure motives, nor did it work through deception. But as you were judged worthy by God to be entrusted with the gospel, that is how you speak, not as trying to please human beings, but rather God who judges our hearts. Nor indeed did you ever appear with flattering speech, as you know, or with a pretext for greed. God is witness. Nor did you seek praise from human beings, although you were able to impose your weight as apostles of Christ. Rather, you were gentle, as a nursing mother cares for her children with such affection for those you meet. You were determined to share with others not only the gospel of God, but your very selves as well. So dearly beloved had others become to you." Now, Kristin, St. Paul wrote that to the Thessalonians, but when he did, he wrote it about himself. We changed the pronouns in this from first person, where Paul was talking about himself, to the third person, as if Paul was talking about you, because it seems to us that you are doing the same kind of mission, the same kind of work as St. Paul did, and that perhaps if he was to write an exhortation to you, he might say precisely these things about your work. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your work first. So how did you, get started with all of this?
I got started when I was in high school volunteering for a pregnancy resource center in my community. Woman at my church was an accountant at a pregnancy center, and she said, hey, ask me, why don't you come and intern with me in the summer? I hear you're looking for some opportunities. And so I did. I went, I started volunteering at a pregnancy resource center. I knew I was pro-woman, and so it sounded like a great job because this was going to be helping out women. But I really had, I can't take credit for knowing what I was getting myself into and knowing that I was going to kind of jump into the pro-life movement head first.
Yeah, I imagine, once you got into it, it ended up, as these types of things are, when you just sort of, surrender yourselves for some greater purpose, they always end up being a lot bigger than perhaps you first thought.
That's right. Yeah, that's definitely right. And it was definitely eye-opening for me because I was raised in a very conservative community. I had heard that abortion is bad, it's wrong to do, but then there really never was any discussion about what happens during an abortion, how abortion, not only violently ends the life of a human child, but it also, harms his mother or her mother, and what it's meant for our society. And so it was really eye-opening for me to be able to go into this pregnancy center, and I was blessed with a center director who wanted me to get active and mentoring the women who were coming into the center. A lot of them were my age, some cases older, and a lot of cases younger than I was, and I was 15. And so they really trained me and invested a lot of time into me so I could learn the truth about what was going on behind the closed doors of Planned Parenthoods and abortion facilities across the country. And then that was a deeply impactful time for me, because everything I thought I wanted to do when I grew up, at the time, I remember I wanted to go to Penn State. I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. I had just won a scholarship to space camp in Huntsville, Alabama at the U.S. Rocket Center. But then I walked into that pregnancy center, and my heart broke for the injustice of abortion that was happening every day. And I just remember thinking, why don't we talk about this more? Why isn't this a conversation that we're having? How come we're not discussing this at school? And so really it changed my entire life.
And that was at age 15 and such.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that must have been tremendously eye-opening, a lot to process for someone so young. I mean, it would seem like, when you find out what's really going on at some of these, Planned Parenthood centers, that might almost be too much to take in.
Yep, definitely. It's a lot. It's a lot to have to process, at 15 of learning what's going on and saying, like, what can I do? I was so lucky because I was there at the pregnancy center. I knew immediately that there was something I could do. There was an impact that I could make within my community. And from there, I went on to start my Students for Life group in my high school, and later when I entered college, I did the same thing. I think a lot of folks, once they kind of hear about the tragedy of abortion, it almost becomes something where it's difficult to process, because the question is, well, what can I actually do? How can I actually make an impact here? And I think we have to do a better job. This is one of the things we do in the pro-life movement and Students for Life all the time, is we want to be able to give you something that you can do.
Right, yeah. So your focus, so Students for Life, the focus is primarily college-age students?
College and high school-age students.
Okay. And so, how big is your organization right now? You started out, I'm sure, relatively small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we started in 2006. We thought there were about 180 existing Students for Life, pro-life groups on college campuses, but that number was not anywhere close to the actual number. Today, 13 years later, we have a full-time team of 48 scattered across the country. We serve more than 1,220 Students for Life groups, and we're in every single state.
Yeah, wow. So, and what primarily is it that you try to do? Say, you get a student who joins Students for Life. What do they get, introduced to, and what's their experience like? What do you try to make it like?
One of the things we want to be able to do is, especially with students who first hear about the injustice of abortion, there's always that question, well, what can I do? So we want to make it as easy as possible for students to get involved, get active right away. And so we've got kits and everything that they need to start a Students for Life group at their school, to start hosting discussions, having an educational display on campus, to start supporting pregnant and parenting students on their campus.
So it's just obviously a continual effort.
Absolutely.
But you're finding people that do want to be involved with this. That's always got to be, I guess, satisfying. There's college-age students.
It's absolutely satisfying, especially when you have, you get to meet a student who said, I never thought that I could do anything, and now I can. And I just had this amazing conversation with somebody, and now I was able to change their mind on abortion.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because they come from the culture which gives them such a different message, and so this has got to be, I guess, in a way, sort of eye-opening for a lot of people.
It definitely is. I mean, they've heard about abortion, but they've never really experienced it. They've never really taken the time to learn more, because honestly, when you learn more about abortion, it makes you angry. Learning more about abortion is going to make you probably reconsider your views. And no one likes to reconsider their views on issues or admit that they previously held an incorrect position. So, what we're trying to do is, it's not always an easy thing, because you're really asking students to deeply consider maybe even the way they're living their lives, and the behavior that they're engaging in. Maybe that needs to change.
Yeah, because so much about the discussion that we have surrounding abortion and right to life, or the so-called right to choose, is a lot of things besides the truth. And when I mean, it just seems like our culture today, in so many ways, has a problem with truth. I mean, we could take forever listening to the number of things in the news. I mean, all you got to do is pay attention to the news every day, and you'll see things where, there are things being told and so forth. People don't, which are not based in the truth, or without a concern. Perhaps that's a better way of phrasing it. Without a real concern for the truth. And so there's, we talk about everything else, and that's certainly true in the abortion field. People talk about everything else. People talk about, primarily the mother and, her desires and whether it's fair or unfair to her. And so, but we don't talk about the child.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing when it comes to abortion is what happens in abortion. Does it violently end the life of a human being that has rights, or does it not? And, I mean, this is a question we get on campuses all the time, and when I'm speaking on college campuses, students will lob every question they can at me. What about this circumstance? What about this? How can you call yourself pro-life and hold this other position, public policy position? They will lob every question at you beyond the actual question of what is abortion. And when you ask students what is abortion, they don't want to tell you what abortion is. And there's a reason for that, because when you get down to the main thing, which what is it? What is it that's inside of her? Is it nothing? Is it simply a blob of tissue? Or is it a unique, whole, living human being? So I think that's something that it's, truth, fundamental truth, what we hear on campuses. I mean, we deal with moral relativism all the time. But we also deal with students who just don't want to know the truth, because if they know the truth, that might change the way they are living their lives, and that's a hard thing for people to do. But you also have the students who they know the truth. They've been, abortion has been explained to them, and it's all relative, and their morality depends on circumstances. And it gets very scary at that point, because often when you start, walking out the logical consequences of moral relativism, they don't agree with those logical consequences. For example, I'll say, well, is it okay if I kill you right now? Have I done anything morally wrong if I take a knife and start stabbing you? Because maybe you've triggered me. Maybe you've offended me. How can you judge that what I'm doing is wrong? Because maybe for me it's the right thing that you don't exist on this earth anymore. And so, moral relativism falls away very quickly when you get into a practical, discussion of what happens. But it's difficult. So, our method on campuses is, a very common evangelization tool of belong, believe, behave. We call it BBB, and it's very true of, often when we're trying to convert young people into thinking differently about abortion, to putting aside what they've heard from the abortion industry, first we want them to know who we are as pro-lifers, what we stand for, because often if, this is a common tool, if people don't like you, they're not going to listen to you. So you have to be likable, you have to be approachable, you have to show them that you're there in love, to speak truth in love, and that's difficult because often, I was just reading a story from one of our regional coordinators in Ohio from end of last week who a young woman walked up to her, identified as pro-choice and said, by the end of the discussion, I never knew pro-lifers were like this. And all we did was talk about the resources and support that we advocate and that we actually put our money where our mouth is by supporting pregnancy centers, maternity homes, and promoting FQHCs for qualified health centers across the country. And so it was just shocking to her because of what the rhetoric she heard is pro-lifers are crazy Bible-thumping extremists that don't care about women. Which we all know is, yes, we might be Bible thumpers, but we're Bible thumpers for a reason, and we do care about women, and we do this out of love. We don't go and, sidewalk counsel in front of an abortion facility at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning because of hate. We make that sacrifice because we know what we're called to do by our Holy Father. So it's something we do out of love. So I find a lot of times on campuses, before we can get to the discussion of truth, of what is truth, is we have to first show them that who we are as pro-lifers, and so then they'll actually take the information that we're presenting to them and then seriously consider it.
Yeah. So, I started off suggesting that the work you were doing, you and all the others in your organization are doing, that work is like the work of St. Paul. And as you're talking right now, I mean, Paul, when he described himself, said he was gentle and he was sharing his very self. And here you're talking about what you're doing. You got to do it out of love, and you got to show people who you are. You're doing that very same thing. You're being gentle, and you're sharing your very selves. I mean, this is I often like to use these letters of St. Paul to basically ask this one question. Okay, are we doing the same things that he was doing? Are we following the same principles that he followed? Because, consistency is usually an earmark of truth. And if you're consistent with something that's been accepted by the church for 2,000 years, the writings of Paul, I mean, there must have been something good about St. Paul for the church, for people, and not just the Catholic Church, but, Protestants who obviously, read and interpret and try to follow the writings of St. Paul. And here you are, what you're talking about is consistent with exactly the same approach that he took. So so to me, I don't know, I just wanted to point that out because frankly, it's impressive. Now, you mentioned the three things, belong, believe, and behave. So belong to what? Belong to who?
Belong to, it's any type of, so if you're trying to convert someone to Christianity, you want someone to feel that they belong to your group, to Christians. When we're working on college campuses, we want them to feel like they can belong with us as Students for Life, as a member of the pro-life movement. So that's why a lot of things that we do on campuses, it's not just educational, but we're also trying to build up a sense of community within the Students for Life group. Because a lot, the best way we get members is word of mouth. A friend says, hey, you should join me at this club meeting. You should come. And so we try to build a sense of community there within that Students for Life group, especially when you're talking about now on college campuses where, from day one, if you hold a Christian worldview, or really it's just a biblical worldview, if you're Jewish or Christian, you hold a biblical worldview, it's going to be under attack the first moment you step on campus. That first class you take, the sorority fraternity you start rushing in the fall, your worldview is going to be constantly under attack. By joining a Students for Life group, by joining this pro-life group on campus, it's a way for you to kind of find like-minded people. You might not agree on everything. You might have you're going to have Catholics, you're going to have Protestants, you might have Mormons, you might have Jewish members. Sometimes we have Muslim members. you're not going to agree on everything, but you're going to have people that have a biblical world of view, which, really on campuses is so needed that, that's one of the things I always try to tell folks, as soon as your child or your grandchild goes to campus, make sure they get in with a good group of friends, because that is going to make or break them. I often hear the sad stories from supporters, from people I meet across the country of, hey, my daughter just came home from college over Thanksgiving break and said this, what do I say? Or, what happened? Because, and so our students have to go into school prepared to defend their worldview, and they have to find others who share their worldview. And a pro-life group is a great way to do it. I mean, our groups are secular in nature. We welcome atheists, agnostic members, but that's a slim minority who actually are, non-believers in the groups. And so joining a Students for Life group is a great way to kind of find others who are going to share your worldview. And once you're going to start belonging, a student may not be someone who's ever been out in the streets protesting or kind of consider themselves an activist, but once they start to belong, they'll start believing, they'll start listening to the information that's being, sent down to them about what's happening, in Planned Parenthoods across the country, what's happening in Washington, D.C., what's happening at the state capitol. They'll start digesting that information, and then they'll start acting on that information. And we've been able to see just this remarkable, kind of this transformation of a lot of students who kind of were very meek and, kind of timid when they entered the Students for Life group, who ended up becoming the leaders of the group, not backing down, fighting their administration for their First Amendment rights. But they always followed this very simple model.
Yeah, I mean, but you really talk about, it's just peer pressure, and it can be so strong, so powerful. I mean, I've got a young daughter I've got one daughter who went through college. I've got another daughter who's just starting college, and you worry about the college atmosphere, and will she come home and then all of a sudden be telling me things? I'm like, wow, and I'm sure a lot of people experience that. It's hard to maintain the attitude that you're talking about in the midst of all this. I mean, that pressure can be very strong.
It's absolutely very strong. I know what it's like. I lost a lot of great friends that first year of college, friends that we had shared similar worldview, and then we went our separate ways. They rushed a different fraternity or sorority, and a year later they were a totally different person. And so I've seen it firsthand in my life, and we've seen it obviously on college campuses. And I know it's something that no matter where I go, this is something that it comes up from supporters and adults asking my thoughts of what can I do and how do I prepare my young person in my life to handle this.
Yeah, it is so hard because there's so much in the culture today, but just the fact that you've got these groups on these campuses, you might have an event or something where just assign Students for Life, even if somebody's not joining the group, just to have to create an awareness, that there's a presence there, there are other people there. I mean, that in and of itself is doing yeoman's work. But for the people that do join your groups, unless there's a group, they'd be hard pressed to try to maintain any kind of a pro-life attitude. I mean, you do need the support, from other people. It'd be hard to imagine trying to maintain something without it. So that's obviously important. So then you talked about belong, believe, and behave. So then believe is the second part of this component. So obviously you bring Christ into this.
We don't. On the college campus, we present it in a secular manner. We talk about abortion as a human right, the world's largest human rights injustice that's going on. Religion comes up frequently if you're talking with a Christian student, but if you're talking to a student that's fallen away from their faith, sadly, religion doesn't come up. Now it's interesting because when you're having a long, in-depth discussion with somebody, the question always becomes why do humans have value, and that's a question that has to be answered in faith, right? Why are human beings more valuable than cockroaches? Where do we get our value from? That's a question that definitely is needs a religious answer, because we know why we have value, because we were created in God's image. But it's interesting on the campuses. Often, religion doesn't really ever come up, where the students, even the atheist students, will agree with you that humans have value. And if you dig into it, why do humans have value? They literally have no answer for it. Actually, on my podcast 2 weeks ago, I interviewed a friend of mine who's an atheist pro-lifer in San Francisco, and I asked her that question of, well, why do humans have value? Why are you fighting in this cause? And it was interesting because her answer was, well, atheists never ask that question. We just know humans have value. So it's a really elementary response that you get.
But we're dealing with foundational issues. I mean, so many kids that have, anxiety with young people, stress with young people. I hear so many stories about kids having anxiety and stress. And I think it goes, and a lot of people have all kinds of different answers for it. Well, it's the internet, it's social media, it's it's so many different, it's this, that, it's another thing. But I think maybe a large part of the answer is that these foundational questions need answers.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really don't know whether or not you even have value, if the culture doesn't answer that question for you, and you're trying to, find your way as a young person in this world, and these questions, and you don't have answers for these questions, or people maybe don't have answers for these questions, and you wonder whether or not that's just. Talk about a lack of stability, a lack of a foundation. It's to me, it seems like that could be. You have to answer that question. So when your focus is on believing. It's believing what? That the unborn child is alive. It's believing that humans have value. Is that what we're talking about?
That's right. That's exactly right. That the unborn child is a member of our species and has the same value and same rights as you and I do.
Yeah. And it's amazing that we even have to, ask this question. Now, my perspective is from the legal field. So I'm a lawyer, but. And I pay attention to some of the developments in this area, and it's amazing that as some of these states like New York and Illinois are trying to pass legislation in case Roe versus Wade ever, was overturned, they're finding it necessary to address precisely this issue. For example, some of the most appalling aspects of like the New York law, just to take one example, is this idea that if a child happens somehow to survive an abortion, how horrific. You try to terminate the life. You try to kill the child, and somehow you're not successful, and this child lives, and then it's survived. It's alive. It's breathing. You don't have to care for it. You don't have to offer any medical care for it. And I hear these horrible stories. I've heard these horrible stories of like a baby, maybe for as much as an hour, crying, fighting for life, vulnerable. Can't do anything for itself, and nobody, can help it. And it's like, how do these people manage to listen to that? I guess this is the kind of story that people don't want to talk about, and maybe it's eye-opening for kids. I mean, you talk about showing kids so many things that raises their awareness. Perhaps this is one of those types of examples. But it's got to be.
It's a difficult thing because it sounds so horrible that people don't even believe it actually happened. So there's almost like a conspiracy theory. Like, no, you're wrong. That doesn't happen. I mean, you would not believe how many times we've heard you're lying. Late-term abortions aren't legal in our country. I'm like, what? Can you Google this answer for me?
Right.
And usually I do. I bring up Google, and I'm like, well, if you don't trust me, let's go to Google, and we'll find the answers together. And so, but it sounds so terrible that they don't think it can be the truth, and they don't really want to dig in to find out if it's the truth, because, like, going back to my earlier comments, if you dig in to find out if it's the truth, then you're going to have to reconsider your views. Then you might have to reconsider your behaviors. And so it's hard. we do talk about infanticide. We talk about the extremism. We have talked about these stories, but we do find it there is a stumbling block there because it sounds so horrific that they don't believe what we're saying actually happens.
Yeah, talk about being disconnected from reality. Here we make legal, we actually pass laws that provide for this, and people don't even know about it because it is too horrific to comprehend. Well, no, we can't do that. I mean, it's just shining the light of truth on something. It's got to be amazing. So then the third part of your equation was to behave. So what do you folks mean by that?
That is getting active. So what are you doing now that you know you belong? Now that you've started listening and you understand the injustice of abortion, now what are you going to do about it? How are you going to act? And that's getting them to act. That's getting them to take notice of the issue and then do something about it.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, how can you hear? How can you hear all of this? And I guess for some people, they hear these types of hear the types of information that you can impart. They're probably anxious to get started. Other people probably are afraid to do anything. I suppose there's a mixture of reactions.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a fear of, if I do something, will people, will my friends get angry with me? Will I get punished by my school? And so a lot of what we're doing, we try to assuage that fear of students of, no, this is what you're called to do, and you need to be courageous in doing it. So we spend a lot of time pumping students up and saying, you can't be afraid of the truth. And then we also provide that backbone with our, we have pro bono lawyers at, Thomas More Society, Alliance Defending Freedom, that we're there. And we say, look, if you ever run into a problem, we'll 100% be with you every step of the way. And that's what's so important about our regional coordinator program, that we have full-time staff spread out across the country who are willing to come to your campus. They are doing trainings, meeting with students at coffee shops at 9 o'clock at night. And so we'll really kind of hold their hand and walk them through becoming an activist.
Yeah, I mean that's still got to be scary though for a college-age kid to say, "Well, we can provide you legal help if you need it." I mean, that's still got to be pretty scary. Yeah. So, but yeah, thankfully there are these organizations like as you say, Thomas More that will do that sort of thing. So, but you must run into this yourself. I know you kind of alluded to it, but you speak on college campuses. I know you talked about getting thrown every kind of question, but you must have had encounters where, some of the opposition gets, intense.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we had a banner of my face that was advertising my speaking event. My last stop in May on my speaking tour was burned, set on fire while I was still attached to the building. We had a bomb threat just a couple of weeks ago on a campus in Minnesota where we were hosting a training, ironically, on embracing the controversy. So yeah, I mean, we have these. We got a death threat yesterday that came into our headquarters there in Virginia. So we definitely have these extremist moments that pop up, and I actually think it's getting worse. And I've talked to our staff, I've talked to our student leaders about being on guard because I actually think it's going to continue to get worse. Not only are we going to have protesters and people lobbying crazy questions at our events, which I don't mind. I actually enjoy having protesters and those who disagree with me at events. I get angry when there's only people who agree with me in my speaking events. But you also are going to have these extremists as well. And I think as we get closer to the day of reversing Roe versus Wade, it's going to get more intense.
Yeah, I mean, our country is just simply so polarized right now, and it seems like there's a license to go ahead and act out. That there's no opprobrium, there's no stigma attached.
Nope, there's absolutely no stigma, and we have members of Congress who encourage this behavior. Sadly.
Oh, yeah, leaders of our society. it's got to be hard for you because you've got to try to, in the face of this, encourage your people to, remain strong. That's got to be hard. I mean, just to be able to find, the words, to tell your people in the face of some of this. I mean, that's got to be hard.
It can be difficult. Like I said, I thrive off of, opposition and controversy, so it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me at all because I fully expect this is when you're trying to relay this message of truth and you're facing off against $1 billion a year abortion industry, that it's going to be difficult. I think it becomes scary for students and frightening for them to kind of step up and to speak out, and that's why it's so important, that belong piece. So, why we have our motto, I am the pro-life generation, why we host, 20-plus leadership summits across the country, why we host the world's largest pro-life conference, the National Pro-Life Summit, which will be this January in Washington, D.C. for pro-lifers of all ages. We're constantly putting together events to bring people together, to know that they're not alone and that they're not a minority no matter what someone says to them. They're actually the majority, and that there's a whole team of people standing behind them. There's a whole movement of people standing behind them willing to help.
Yeah. So, I was going to ask you, I mean, my next question was going to be, and I think you've already answered, my next question was going to be, how do you yourself cope? And you say you thrive off it and you enjoy it, and that's, yeah. But I'm sure to some extent.
I mean, honestly, the worst part for me and the hardest thing for me with serving within the pro-life movement, it's not those on the other side. It's actually the attacks that you get from within. And I think that's with any movement that you see across the globe, because you have, so many people who have dedicated their lives to this issue of ending abortion, but everyone has different strategies and different tactics, and it can get pretty divisive sometimes, where people attack you because they don't agree with your strategy, for example. They think what you're doing isn't hard-hitting enough, or it's too hard-hitting. So I think for me, that was when I started Students for Life 13 years ago, that was and still continues to be the most difficult thing that I have to face, is withstanding the attacks from within.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, yeah, in any organization spread out with as many members as yours, you're going to obviously have a good bit of that. I mean, that's to a certain extent that's unavoidable. But that kind of leads me where I was thinking, which is, so how have things changed over the 13 years? How was your perception over, Students for Life in your organization, what you do? I mean, have your thoughts changed? Have you learned, going about this business, some things that maybe you didn't think of earlier?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've learned so much. When you think about 13 years, I was just turned 21 when I started Students for Life. I'm 34 now. I was newly married. I've been married for 13 years now. I have 4 children. So I've really grown up in that 13 years and had to learn a lot being thrown into this. And so things have changed. Strategies even within Students for Life have changed. And I'm constantly reevaluating what are we doing on college campuses, and is what we're doing the most effective thing we can be doing. It's the most cost-effective thing that we can be doing to bring about the most number of conversions, the most number of mobilized young people against abortion. And so that's one of the things that I've always challenged myself and our team with is, not being afraid to innovate and to embrace that change and ask those hard questions. And so we can always be on that cutting edge. We're dealing with a population, every year they get younger and I get older. So I'm constantly, having to stay on top of the latest technology and the latest trends, and things that we did in 2006 don't work today in 2019, and that's okay. And so we're constantly reevaluating, changing our strategies. Thankfully, so much of what we do is based on those timeless principles of building, personal relationships, going one-by-one, training and empowering leaders. So much of what we do is timeless, and so that helps us. But we're still constantly innovating and changing. And in fact, innovation is one of our core values that we have, that every team member must display, who works for me.
Yeah. So what is your what is your vision or your hopes, for going forward? What do you see in the years ahead?
Sure. Well, we're preparing for a post-Roe America. When we started Students for Life, I would kind of introduce myself around D.C. as the post-Roe organization, and people kind of told me, some of my mentors politely told me I need to stop saying that because I was freaking everybody out, that it was too unimaginable, that it just seemed too naive, and it was just too scary. But now, everyone's talking about post-Roe America. I've done numerous, radio and television and, newspaper interviews just in the past 6 months on this concept. It's been personally very gratifying to have to talk about so much. My fall speaking tour is Make Abortion Illegal Again. My tour that's going to 150 campuses this fall, our display says it's Life After Roe. And so we've been able to talk about a post-Roe nation. I think that's coming. I think a lot of this is going to depend on 2020. This is why 2020, the presidential election, is going to be so key, because we are so close. We have 5 Supreme Court justices who are pro-life right now, but I do believe we're going to need 6 or 7 to get them to do something as dramatic as reversing 40 years of abortion policy. But that's not going to make abortion illegal. That's going to send the decision of abortion back to the states. And so what I've been really focusing on is, how do you prepare our movement for that day? Because so much of what we do in the pro-life movement is focused on Washington, D.C., but where we know where all the state legislation has been passed, more than 300 pieces of pro-life legislation have been passed in the last decade in states. We're shutting down abortion facilities in states. And so I've been focusing on is building up the leadership, building up coalitions within states to be ready to go, because the day Roe is reversed, I'm going to have Students for Life groups in every single state across the country. I'm going to have staff spread out in all the key regions, and we're going to be ready to go to make abortion illegal in those states, and we're going to have to go state by state to do that, and make it also unthinkable in those states, of preparing marketing plans and everything we can do to show women in every state that abortion isn't something that they have to do, that there are better options and there are better resources available to them.
Yeah. Well, not only are you preparing for Roe versus Wade, but, I think the people that are in support of abortion, they know.
Absolutely, they are. Mm-hmm.
They know it's coming. Yeah, I mean, yep. I just mentioned the laws in New York, in Illinois. I mean, a lot of these people are passing these laws in anticipation of the day Roe is gone.
Absolutely.
They're changing their state constitutions. They're changing their state laws. Yeah, they know it's coming. But I think you're right. You're going to need more than just a 5-4 majority to change 40 years. But so your mission's going to change. Your mission's going to even get bigger.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why, I was talking about the extremism rising. This is why the extremism is rising on the campuses. The threats are going to be increasing because they're sending out the emails. They're sending out the emails. They're sending out the clarion call saying this is a problem. We need to step up here. And they're trying to mobilize their base more than they ever have before.
Yeah. Well, I know here in St. Louis, we've got a court case where the sole remaining abortion facility in Missouri, has got questions over its license, and there's efforts, to try to close it. That's amazing because they don't, the state wanted to ask them, well, hey, can you answer us these questions because we want to, ensure, the health standards are being met, and they refused, and it's. So they fight like crazy just to maintain, the one facility. But then, of course, just across the border in southern Illinois, now they're opening up this mega abortions. The fight just goes on and on, doesn't it? It sort of almost never stops. Yeah. So I mean, your life must be now a lot different. As you said, you had thought about, Penn State and this and that. So your life has got to be so much different, but you've got to feel good about the change that you've already made. some of the work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's been, the Holy Spirit, it's been an amazing kind of ride to see how the Holy Spirit can use willing bodies. It would be great to be able to say I knew when we started Students for Life exactly what it was going to become. I had no idea, I had no idea of the growth, of the magnitude, the outreach we were going to be able to perform. And I think it's just proof that, when you offer yourself, when you tell the Holy Spirit and ask the Holy Spirit to work through you, what can actually be accomplished.
Oh, yeah, the things that you would think, I could never do this, or this could never happen. Yeah. So now a big thing this year, of course, was this movie Unplanned. What kind of effect have you seen from that?
Well, we spent more than $35,000 in buying tickets to Unplanned. So we had several of our Students for Life groups, dozens of groups go, and they brought groups of students to attend Unplanned. And we also gave away 2 tickets to students. So if they pledged to take a pro-choice friend, parent, family member with them to the movie, we bought them and their friends a ticket. So we spent a lot of money getting students to go out to the movies, because one of my big concerns was how do you get pro-choice people actually out to the movie? Because once again, you're going to be faced with an uncomfortable truth, and going and seeing a pro-life movie is challenging for a pro-choice person. It's not really something they want to do. It's not top on their list. It was a very busy spring semester. Right now on college campuses, what we're doing is a lot different. We've actually gotten the license to show the movie on college campuses across America, and so now we're going to be showing this movie on college campuses. We have a partnership with an evangelical Christian TV, God TV, and we'll be doing it in partnership with them. And so that to me is really exciting. It's actually more exciting than it being in the movie theaters, because now we can go to actually where pro-choice people really are. We can bribe them with free burritos and pizza, and we're fundraising for all of that food, but we'll be actually able to take the movie exactly where they're at.
It seems like the pro-choice people, like I say, call it pro-choice, that's their terminology, but they've understood for a long time that the important field for persuasion is with the young. I mean, I think your website says, that 79% of the Planned Parenthood facilities in the country are 5 miles within a 5-mile radius of college campus. I mean, they've understood this for a long time, haven't they?
Mm-hmm. They absolutely have, and that's why it was so important. I still get asked all the time when I'm, at events of, your Students for Life, what organization are you part of? Who pays for you? And I'm like, no, we're our own organization. I pay for me. We fundraise. We're a nonprofit, and it's interesting. So I'm like, we have to be an independent organization, because for so long, the pro-life movement said that young people are important, but it was always like the bottom of the barrel. So when budget cuts came, the youth program was the first thing to go, or the youth director would get 4 other titles. And so it just wasn't something that was never really got top of anybody's radar. It always got kind of pushed down in favor of something emergency that was happening in Washington, D.C. or in a local community. And so that's why we had to have this independent entity that all we do all day long is help young people speak out. And it's working, and it's so important, because when you think about, changing the culture, changing our laws, we have to change our culture in order to change our laws in America. I believe politics is downstream from culture in many regards, and culture is formed on the college campuses. We know this because this is how, Hollywood, they target young people with their advertising. They're always looking to young people for their trends and how they're going to talk about an issue in their movies or TV shows. And if you can pass all the pro-life laws you want today, but if you lose this generation, everything will be reversed in 20, 25 years.
Well, that's another thing that they understand, that people on the other side understand. I mean, Antonio Gramsci, the Frankfurt School, all those people, they understood that for example, if you want to take socialist thought, you forget trying to, do some massive revolution. You got to change the culture, so do it little by little. And, the people have done this for a long time. There was that one doctor who, I think he helped found NARAL, and then years later he had a conversion.
Put Nathan's in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then years later he had this conversion, and he said, "Hey, the way we got Roe versus Wade decided in the first place is first we fudged the numbers, and then we fudged the numbers, and then got everybody to believe it. You create the culture that there's this massive problem with back alley abortions and this and that. And you get people's emotional feelings on your side, and you can you change the culture, then you change the law. You obviously understand that. So that's terrific. Well, it sounds like you're fighting the good fight. You've obviously you've changed people's lives. The people in your organization. You really have. You must. After people get out of college and so forth, and they move on, their lives have still been changed. You've opened up,
and that's what we're hoping is that that we're able to touch people's lives in a way that even when they graduate, they'll be able to do something. They'll be able to step up, and when that day that Roe is reversed, it comes, and their community, they'll be able to re-engage in the fight.
Yeah, that's really what it is, because other they take their views and they raise families of their own. They're going to have different views when they do that. They talk to people in their own families. I guess there must be interesting stories too about people within their own families, people who join Students for Life, and maybe in their own families it causes a little conflict or friction. I'm sure you must hear about things of that nature.
Oh, absolutely, yes, we hear about that all the time.
Yeah. But you give them, I guess, the courage to fight. So now this is your, basically this is going to be, this is your life now. This is what you've got going forward. This is going to keep you busy for a few years still.
Absolutely. This is my life mission. Yeah.
And as I say, since you've changed so many people, that's got to make you feel good. I know you still must be aware of the daunting task.
It's not really me, but that's the Holy Spirit. I'm just doing what the Holy Spirit wants me to do. So I don't really take credit for that.
Well, God bless you. God bless you for doing it. So we're going to, I guess, close this
Sure.
out. I want to, thank you so much for the time that you've given us, and just to go back to this letter from St. Paul, with which we started. I want to point out that it starts up by saying that your work, St. Paul's work, your work, is not without effect. It's not without effect, even though you're insolently treated and have been insolently treated. And I just want to tell you that, and I'm sure you know it, but it's never hurts to say it again. Your work is creating tremendous effect. Just as a personal aside, or maybe as a little item of fair disclosure. My wife and I have supported your organization for some time. We believe in what you do.
You.
We think we think what you're doing is great, and God bless you. In these times, what you're doing is so hard, and you're doing it so faithfully. So, anyways, I not only want to thank you for spending time with us this morning, but I want to thank you for all you've done. And all I know you're still going to do. So, Kristin, thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me today, Ray. And thanks for all your support. God bless.
God bless you. So, for all our listeners, we thank you for joining us again. We hope that we've created some food for thought. We've maybe shared with you some news or some ideas maybe you didn't have, or didn't occur to you before. We hope this has been interesting. We ask you. We look forward to you joining us again in the future. And until then, God bless. So, Kristin, thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.